The Jacksonville Jaguars make some interesting decisions, to say the least. This offseason has been an odd one, and they've spent a lot of money, and I don't know how much better they've got. In fact, I don't think they've got much better at all, and I think that they've overspent. That's my feelings on it, but let's get into the data. And I figured a great way to really figure out if they've overspent or if they haven't overspent is simply by looking at every single contract and figuring out what we expect their value to be the following year. So this is every contract they've handed out. I'm also including Cam Robinson's franchise tag in all of this, as he is somebody who, they could have let walk and they instead decided to tag for a year. Just so you know how this chart works, the column all the way on the left, that is going to be, the players. So Cam Robinson, Brandon Sheriff, all of that. Cap, that's how much cap space is going to be taken up the first season. The average, that's the average cap space per season if these contracts get played out. And then finally, WAR. This is Pro Football Focus's WAR for these players for the fall or previous season. So their 2020 WAR. Excuse me, their 2021 WAR, not 2020. The year's 2022. It flew by, okay? 2021 WAR. So most previous season, what their WAR was according to PFF. So anyways, yeah, just going down the list, Cam Robinson, $16.6 million this year, and he was actually a negative WAR player. So again, if you don't know what WAR is, that stands for wins above replacement. So that basically, it's a good way to measure how much wins you have, and it's actually very predictable. Teams with high WAR guys tend to be teams with a lot of wins, and it tends to match up pretty well to how much wins a team actually has, which is interesting. So Robinson, they're paying a lot of money to be worse than replacement level. At least he was last year. Brandon Sheriff is a good player. Again, guard, you're not going to be able to rack up WAR the way you might some other positions. So that's the only real issue. But 0.2 WAR last year. He's been in and out of the lineup due to injuries, so that's kind of an issue. Was 0.37 in 2022, so that's an important note. Foyesade Aluakon was a negative WAR player, and pretty significantly at 0.1. They're paying him an average of $15 million a year, $6.6 million cap hit this following year. And you can keep going down the list if you want to. Fatuski is a positive WAR player, so there you go. You're getting a player who's helping you at least for $10 million a year on average. Christian Kirk, of course, was the contract everyone made fun of, but he's actually the guy who had the best season out of any of them last year, so he is going to help their team. Now, again, is he worth the contract of $18 million a year? No, but he is going to help their team. Evan Ingram adds some value. Zay Jones adds some value. And Darius Williams, a deal I don't hate at all, and could actually end up being like a pretty significantly decent deal, at least, if he can return to 2020 form. So anyways, at the bottom, the total cap hit they added on with these moves, and again, there were more smaller moves. I'm mostly talking about the big ones. The total cap hit they've added on is $64.3 million. The total money spent, which to me is the more important stat, is $103.1 million. And then the WAR is that they're adding, if everyone adds the same amount of WAR they did last year, would be 0.95. Now, again, many people, specifically Jaguars fans, are going to sit here and say, okay, one win, but some of these guys could be used better. Christian Kirk is someone who people have pointed at as maybe could be used a little bit better than he was in Arizona. I would agree with that. And Cam Robinson, I think, is probably better than a below replacement level player. He could have a bounce back year. If Brandon Sheriff stays healthy, maybe you think you can use Aluakon better. So there's reasons to believe that maybe it's going to be more than one, but last year it was less than one. And this chart is a good example of kind of showing how much money you should be spending for wins, basically. So the cap hit, again, just the things we've already talked about. The cap hit they're adding on this year is $64.3 million. The average salary they're adding on this season is $103.1. So WAR added just 0.95. The average WAR for $64.3 million in cap space is 2.7. That's how much the average team would spend if you spend $204 million, which is what the cap is at. The average WAR for salaries of 103.1, which is actually a better number to use, in my opinion, because typically when guys get cut, it's less about the cap and more about the actual money they have just in the pool of what the franchise is willing to spend. And the amount of WAR that you would expect an average team to get out of $103 million in terms of cash is 4.3, which is a lot more than 1. And again, this is just average. This is to get you to 8.5 wins. You obviously want more than that. You want to win a Super Bowl. And to me, the number I always have in my head of like what you should be trying to get to is 13 wins. That wouldn't guarantee you a Super Bowl, but that puts you in the Super Bowl championship contention kind of range. And so the WAR to get 13 wins for $64.3 million in cap space, you would really want to get 4.1 wins out of that cap space. That's what you would want if you're going to get 13 wins. The WAR to get to 13 wins with $103 million in cash is 6.14. So we're talking nearly a 5-win jump from what they actually got last year with these guys. So that's a concern. I think it's fair to say that this kind of really puts into emphasis how this didn't really work out maybe the way you would want it to. Now, the flip side, and again, things I'm sure Jaguars fans are going to point out is, well, we have a young quarterback on a rookie deal. And so we're getting more WAR per dollar spent with that, especially if he's good, which a lot of people expect him to be, then, we can afford to overpay for other guys, which is true. I mean, for example, if Trevor Lawrence were to be, getting 4 wins and only getting $15 million, well, now the numbers change, right? The math changes. You don't need to get a win with every $17 million you're spending on other guys. You can maybe get it with $25 million or even $30 million. However, they're looking at spending $100 million on a win. Even if you want to say it's 2 wins, doubling what they got last year, more than doubling what they got last year, you're still looking at $50 million in average salary per just 1 win. That's not a good ratio, and you're also spending a lot of it, which means that it's going to be more difficult to spend more. Now, here's the other argument, and this is probably, if I am going to be, if I'm the Jaguars PR guy and I have to explain this to the masses to get people to not want to fire everyone involved, here's what I say. I simply just say, listen, these moves are long-term moves. These guys are probably not going to be around 3 years from now when we're trying to be competitive. We're not trying to be competitive next year, probably not trying to be competitive the year after, but what we can do at least is get a Christian Kirk. We're overpaying for him, but you know what? He's going to help with Trevor Lawrence's development. We're giving a receiver that can actually showcase what Lawrence can do, and once you see that, then a free agent next year might say, I kind of want to play for that star players. In Jacksonville, it's lovely weather. Like, yeah, sure, let me go there. So that's the argument, is you're building up kind of you just player development, basically. You're getting your players to develop better by putting better players around them, and you have to overpay for that now, but hopefully in a couple of years you can get good contracts, and the bad contracts you can get rid of, which they probably will do with some of these. So that's the argument. To me, I'd rather just spend this on good players. I guess that's not exactly how you can make this work, but I guess what I think is that, with the Christian Kirk money, I would have rather seen them gone after and again, it's weird because Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams both specifically said they wanted to go to a certain place. So I don't know if you could have actually made any of those moves. So that's where things, again, get a little weird. But I would have liked to see that, obviously, than what ended up happening of giving the Christian Kirk the contract. I don't think the Jaguars are dead. I don't think the Jaguars are screwed for years to come. I don't think the Jaguars were going to be good next year anyways, regardless of what they did. So I'm not that concerned necessarily, but I do think that this is not the best road. And again, if a lot of these contracts, if you're saying it's actually a good deal because soon we can get rid of that player and not have to pay that much in dead money, that's not a good contract then. You haven't won anything. You just didn't lose something. Like, a lot of people will say, it's actually only the guaranteed money that matters. It's like, well, only if you get rid of the player, in which case it's a bad contract because you got rid of the player. You didn't add anything. You didn't feel the player was worth it anymore. So not really. I think that people overvalue that too much, in my opinion. I'd rather just have a good player, even if it's, fully guaranteed. I don't really care as much about that. The only reason you care about guaranteed money is if the player isn't as good as you thought they would be when you went out and got him. That's kind of how I view it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on all of this? It's interesting stuff. I always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.